You know, guys, I thought I had hopes on coming into this video in being able to educate and show you any new wonderful changes that are coming to the weapon sets in Season 5, right? Any buffs, any good nerfs, anything that actually mixes the meta up. I was thinking to myself, right? Okay, we had the GPR91, we had the LC10, we had the Growl. These are great weapons right now. We've had them for the entirety of Season 4. They didn't make any changes after Season 4 Reloaded. They gotta have knocked it off the throne in Season 5. They didn't do shit. No, I'm serious, guys. It literally feels like the bosses at Activision just went to the devs and said, hey, Season 5 is coming up. Players are expecting some type of weapon change. I don't know what kind of weapon change you guys need to do because I'm not paying attention to the game, but change some numbers around, make something happen. That's basically what it feels like for these weapon set changes. I don't even know why I'm calling it weapon sets. What are we in World of Warcraft? Weapon stat changes. Like, I'm not even joking, guys. I took all the weapon changes that happened in Season 5. I put it into a Google Sheet format. I'm going to show you that sheet, and I'm going to show you the literal changes or buffs or nerfs that they actually did to the weapons when it's literally non-existent on how that actually changes the weapon itself. So if you guys ever want to know my level of nerdiness in Call of Duty, this is my level of nerdiness right here, okay? I created an Excel sheet. I created a Google sheet. Now, call me a wannabe JGod or wannabe exclusive ace. I think they're great Call of Duty informants, and I feel like in my content, that's kind of similar of what I want to do. I want to be able to show the changes in the most simplified way possible so that you guys can understand and you guys don't have to read through all the patch notes. Let me nerd out and do that for you, and I got this Google sheet that you can take a look at. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a link to this Google sheet. I'm going to put it in the description. Feel free to look at it. It's free. It doesn't cost anything, but I would really appreciate it if you could drop a sub to the channel. Anyways, let's continue on. So if you're looking for like a complete detailed breakdown of this, guys, feel free to look at this sheet, right? I don't want to talk about every single change, but I kind of want to give you the reason that I say that the weapon changes that happen, or the nerfs and buffs that are happening this season, is literally non-existent. So let's start with the ARs, right? A lot of the ARs didn't have much of a change. They just increased the maximum damage range, medium damage range, and minimum damage range. I'm guessing they wanted a little bit more efficacy on these shots working at medium to long range distances. That's the only thing I can think of for these damage range changes. Now, if you notice, for the ARs, they didn't do anything with the GPR91. The GPR91 is the only one that is holding at 592 TTK if you just do chest shots only from close to medium distance. And I don't see any nerfs that happen with the GPR91. And then some of the buffs they only included with some of these ARs is we're looking at bullet velocity. You're looking at like a 15 meters a second increase. We got here 20 meters a second increase for the AMAX. We got another 20 meters per second increase for the Model L. Just know that every time they change the bullet velocity, they're just essentially changing the hit scan range that these weapons can do. But when you're looking at something as small as 20 meters a second for the changes, you're looking at maybe 3 or 4 meter differences of like increasing or decreasing on that hit scan range. So it's very, very minor. So I'm not too sure why they're making these small value changes on bullet velocity. If they really wanted to increase or decrease hit scan ranges, they should at least be 50 meters a second and above to see actual difference in hit range. I'd say out of all the ARs, the only one that has an honorable mention of something that's remotely changing is going to be the AS Val. For the AS Val's recoil spring mod, they upgraded the percentages on vertical and horizontal recoil control by about 7%. They also increased the headshot multiplier and the lower torso leg multiplier by about 0.5x. With these changes on the AS Val, it brings the TTK down to 604 milliseconds. Not as close as the GPR91 at 592, but look at 592 and 604, you're looking at what? A 12 millisecond difference. That's very, very small. So I'd say an honorable mention that's getting close to that GPR meta is probably going to be the AS Val. So here's an example, guys, of why I don't understand why they make these changes. We're moving on to the SMGs. Look at the C9. They say that they apparently buffed the C9's max damage range. They went from being able to hit max damage range at 13 meters to a whopping 14 meters. They increased the meter by 1. Same thing with the PDW, right? They increased the max damage ranges by 1, and then they also increased the ADS speed by 5 milliseconds. Ooh, it's crazy. Same thing with the compact. You only increase the ADS speed by 10 milliseconds. Now, these changes with the ADS speeds in milliseconds, if we're only looking at variations of 5 to 10 milliseconds, that's literally the difference of a player having fiber internet connection to a regular standard 500 gig connection. The value changes, again, like I said, they're not big enough to make any actual changes for these weapons. These weapons are literally the same because of how low of the values that they changed. Again, this almost feels like the devs just said, okay, we got to change something so that the players think that we changed something. We're not going to have nerdy players like me talk about how those changes literally make no changes at all to these weapons. But hey, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, right? These devs are working hard, right? They changed the LC10 meta. They nerfed the LC10. Check this out, guys. They went from their max damage range, it was at a whopping 12 meters. They nerfed it down to the ground by dropping it to 11 meters. Isn't that insane? But wait, there's more. Look, they dropped the headshot multiplier by 0.03x, the arm multiplier by 0.2x. Are you kidding me? The only nerf I could see with LC10 is that they increased the ADS time by about 15 milliseconds. That's literally the only thing that I think is personally changing it, because I tested this in the firing range. Time to kill on both close and medium ranges are still the same. Same thing with the Lodger buff. Apparently people are saying that, hey, use the Lodger now, it's crazy meta. No, it's not. The max damage range was increased by 1 meters and the headshot multiplier was only increased by 0.07. 0.07. Now I get it, it's a multiplier, right? The 0.07 is still kind of a big change, but when you tested it out, unless you're hitting all headies, that's when it's going to meet up with the LC10. Only if you're hitting all headies. Because I don't know about you, because the Lodger's recoil is still worse than the LC10. So if you can hit all headies with the Lodger being a worse recoil, great, that's a good skilled player. But I'd say for the overall general player base, the casual player base, I would say keep using the LC10. Lodger's a meh. Now let's look at the LMGs, right? In hindsight, it actually looks like fairly good buffs. A lot of it is a headshot multiplier, upper torso and arm multiplier, and these values are kind of high. Look, you're looking at 0.12x, 0.10x, but I just tried the XMG last night. Regardless, even with these updates, you're still hitting about 800 to 900 time to kill. That is still insanely high and ineffective as a weapon, especially with the slowdown on mobility because it's an LMG. So moving on to the marksmans, the AEK didn't necessarily get a buff. It was the auto attachments that came with the AEK. They increased the headshot multiplier by about 0.13 and the upper torso and arm multiplier about 0.10. The thing is, recoil is still a little meh on the weapon, and the iron sight is still ugly too. You can't necessarily use it like the Grau. You would still have to put a red dot or a Volsky reflex on it. If anything, I think because you have to waste a red dot attachments to just get better accuracy, when you can already get that accuracy with the Grau that has a lower time to kill, this buff on the AEK's attachment is not necessarily going to help improve the weapon overall. Now they did nerf the SWAT, and with the actual nerfs, they did lower the damage range quite considerably. I mean, you're looking going from 43 to 38 meters, 53 to 49 meters. Now these seem like valid nerf on the changes. These are considerable range drop. Then they also nerfed the bullet velocity by dropping about 45 meters a second, which is still a considerable amount. It brings the natural bullet velocity of the Grau by about 1019, I think. But like I said, guys, bullet velocity, it just increases or decreases the hit scan of that weapon. So if you're already playing at a close range with the Grau, even with the 45 meters a second nerf on the bullet velocity, nothing is necessarily going to change on the TTK. Then you got the sniper rifles. The only nerf is the HDR. You're increasing the ADS speed as well as dropping the bullet velocity. They just want to make the other sniper rifles to be more of a pick-me, right? That's the entire reason for these nerfs and buffs, guys. They want to make sure that there's no weapon that's overpowered. They take their data of their pick rate, right? They're finding out what players are using. If a pick rate is too high for a specific weapon, that could be another sign that that weapon could be overpowered. So what do they have to do? They either have to nerf it or buff it so that they can spread the player pick percentages across all weapons rather than just one or two weapons. So yeah, those are the weapon changes for season 5. Like I said, it almost feels non-existent. There's maybe one or two that we can honorably mention, but even then, if you're looking at drastic TTK changes where it knocks certain weapons off the throne, no, GPR 91 is still going to be top, LC10 is still going to be top TTK wise. And like I said, I'm going to leave the link for this Excel sheet in the description below, so if you want to take a look at it and read it yourself, feel free to do so. All I ask is if you can sub to the channel so that way you can stay tuned for the next nerdy Call of Duty video that I can drop, okay? If anything, guys, drop a like on the video. It helps it tremendously in the algorithm. And as always, stay pure, stay noble, and hashtag bring back honest gaming. All right, later, guys.